Now then, you're welcome along. So this is predominantly rugby conversation. Big thank you though off the top. There are lots of nice messages coming in on our Monica Seles, Emma Raducanu piece from yesterday. People seem to really enjoy it. So we would quietly recommend it to you if you haven't had a chance. It's in our feed. As ever, you can follow the YouTube channel at Indo Sport Podcast. Just search all one word on YouTube and you'll find us there. We hadn't really planned on talking rugby today, to be honest, but then rugby said we have news upon news upon news. We have a newly announced Munster head coach, a new Connacht coaching appointment. We have Felix Jones out of hibernation. And of course, we have not one, not two, but three Irish Centurions retiring. So we are talking rugby. The Irish Independent's Ruaidhri O'Connor is with us. Rud, when it rains, it pours. Hello.
Yeah, I wasn't really planning on doing that much work today either, Joe. So it's been a bit busier day than anticipated. You want to hear the curses in the press room when it emerged that Connacht are doing a coaching shake-up as well. There was news from Australia overnight, and everyone was like, "Oh, not like, can we have a moratorium on any more news today? That's it. We're done. We're full."
Yeah. We've drafted in to talk to us predominantly about the three retirees. Andrew Conway, who of course has 150 appearances for Munster across 10 years, 30 caps for Ireland as well. Andrew, this is not you being unveiled as a pundit. This is very much I'll talk to you about this one thing, but then I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. When I got the call from you, and actually when I saw your message, I was on another call. So I was like, who's these big three that are retiring? I knew Conor was coming up soon, knew Peter was coming up soon, and when you're just trying to rack your brains, think that it obviously makes sense the church is involved. So do you know what? It's cool the way they've done it. Doing it together, guys that have been on a journey for a decade and a half together, and I think the way they did it, leading into one last home game, the big one against France. Andy Farrell and now Simon Easterby, they're clever in how they do these things. There's going to be an emotional bounce around the stadium and within the group, and it'd be a special week for them, and it's really cool that they're doing it together.
Well, it was done via Irish rugby social channels today. They put up a little video, so if you haven't seen it yet, then it starts here with Peter O'Mahony staring down the camera, and of course he's not alone. Murray and Healy also in on the act.
Hi everyone, we've got some news to share.
This will be our last Six Nations in green.
It's been an unbelievable journey, and I consider myself very lucky. But the job isn't done, and we've a big couple of weeks ahead.
The three of us have done some very special things together, but we're not done yet.
Your support over the years has been incredible and has never gone unnoticed. So thank you, and hopefully see you in the Aviva for one more time next weekend. Cheers.
Andrew, when the IRFU social media person said, "Guys, I've got a great idea," which of the three of them would have said, "I love it, I can't do it quickly enough," and which of them would have taken the most convincing?
That's a good question. I think they'd all, none of them are massively, it reminds me of the long goodbye for Drico, the long goodbye for Bestie. It seemed like those two goodbyes went on for 2 or 3 seasons, and I think it's kind of fitting that they did it together. It will take the pressure off them individually. It'll take the spotlight off them individually. It'll be, they'll all be bearing the bit of extra weight that comes with it. So I think it wasn't the social media manager's idea. I'd say it came from higher up the rank.
You're doing it. That's it.
Yeah.
Rory, to put meat in the bone, O'Mahony is, as we understand, so they're all retired. They're, as of international rugby, as of full-time against Italy in round 5, they're all gone. O'Mahony is going to retire from rugby, full stop, end of the season. Cian Healey the same, and the word is Murray is going to continue his career abroad.
Yeah, the official word, it was in the statement. We don't know where yet. I suspect France. France is generally the destination of choice to finish your career for a number of different reasons. It's quite a nice place to live, but there's also financially advantageous to finish there as well with the way it's all set up. So I'm sure he's no short of offers given his experience, given his class, like what he'll offer to any club really. I've just come from the Aviva Stadium where all three of them were put up for interview, and they'll be staggered in terms of when they come out over the next couple of days. But Murray, I don't think I'm giving that away to say that Murray feels like he has a lot to offer still. I think he said he was going for 1 year initially, and then he'll see how the body is after that. So he doesn't feel like he's ready to stop. I'm a little bit surprised. Peter O'Mahony just played 80 minutes in Cardiff in a really hot and heavy Six Nations game. So I would be leaning on him a little bit. If I'm sure Andy Farrell, they've had lots of conversations. Still think he's an awful lot to offer. Healy, when he broke the Leinster caps appearance record a couple of months ago, he told us in the press room afterwards this will be his last season. So he isn't a surprise, and I think he's gotten every inch of what he could out of his career and his body. It's amazing he's still going. He's the oldest of the three of them. He's Ireland's most capped player. You know, he's still contributing at the highest level despite all the injuries. And Andrew would be in dressing rooms with him when he was struggling back. And I mean, here he retired in 2015, and here he is 10 years on, still going. All three of them have endured as well as enjoyed their careers. Like, there's been moments where all three of them have faced massive adversity and they've all fought back. They've been on the pitch for all 5 of Ireland's Six Nations wins in the last couple of years. They've all been Lions. Cian Healey was robbed of a test appearance by injury. It was so cruel on him in 2013. You know, Murray's has been on three tours and been a test liner in all 3. He captained the Lions. O'Mahony captained the Lions. Their achievements speak for themselves, and what they'll do is they'll step away at a really interesting point for Ireland. Like, they'll surely leave a vacuum in terms of just what they bring. Andy Farrell loves these 3 players. He loves having them around in terms of what they contribute to the environment. They're probably the 3 players that we get most questioned about kind of fans wondering why are they still there. But you're like, they're obviously valued so highly by this environment. And Andrew would know from as teammates, so they're all serious rugby players, but serious people as well, who've contributed to the teams they've been in for an awful long time.
We have 2 35-year-olds and a 37-year-old in Healy. Let's work our way through them then, Andrew. Let's start with O'Mahony, 35 years of age. As Rory said, played 80 minutes against Wales just last week, which is a testament to his fitness. 112 caps for Ireland. He made his Irish debut back in 2012. Captain last year for the Six Nations, obviously. 3 World Cups under his belt, and the Lions in 17, where he was captain as well, of course, for a game. An extraordinary career. We'll come to the person in a moment. Tell us about the player. There are certain insights you have, I think, by sharing a pitch with the player. Like, there's kind of an intimate understanding of their game and their capabilities. So tell us about O'Mahony, the player.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing for Pete is, as a teammate of his, when you're going into a big game, you know, having him there was confidence, security, big game player, big moments. And, you know, that was the through line, you know, throughout his career. I think he turned up whenever the team needed him, you know, whether that's in red or in green. And he still is a warrior, as, you know, Rory just said, looking at the 80 minutes that he just produced over in Cardiff. But listen, I know that, you know, he was 50-50 on whether he was going to play this year or not. And I think, you know, knowing the man and the player he is, you know, you probably want to go out on your terms and, you know, not go out on a coach's term or a selection going another way. And he's fought tooth and nail to be where he is, you know. He's come back from, you know, being dropped a number of times for Ireland in particular over the last few years. And, you know, he's found a way to add value to the team in a different way. And that's the sign of a proper leader, you know. And I think his playing days will be, you know, remembered for the big moments, but, you know, what the teams that he's been a part of will miss is that kind of the leadership that isn't seen. It's not just what he does in the rugby pitch. It's behind closed doors. It's adding value whenever it's not necessarily, you know, wearing the 6 jersey.
Yeah. And so on the personality, behind closed doors, it'd be great to get your take on that, because he has, but people like it, but he has a gruff exterior. You know, he will, if Marcus Horn is asking a question he doesn't like on TG Carr, he will narrow the eyeballs and give him one. Or he will tell Scotland fans what he thinks of them. You know, he has that kind of a spikiness, which, you know, is probably a good thing in elite sport. Is that his modus operandi behind the scenes? Is there a softer side of captaincy as well? Tell us about the O'Mahony you know.
Yeah, a bit of both. I think Pete's definitely changed over the course of my time knowing him, from when I first went in to, you know, say 18 months ago when I was leaving the dressing room. He became, you know, what you see is what you get with Pete, to be fair. He that's his personality. There's nothing been put on there. He will tell you what he thinks. But the growth, I suppose, was around his, you know, his ability to get the younger players involved, and he understood the value of the younger players feeling like they're a part of something, which can be tough whether it's for Munster or for Ireland, and you got a group of young guys and they're coming into a squad and they're not maybe getting the minutes that they want because there's guys ahead of them. I think the big thing I saw in Peter over particularly in the kind of second half of the years that I was involved with him, was that he understood how to make people feel like they were valued, and understood that, it wasn't always going to be with the minutes on the pitch, with the starting number and their back. It was, the conversations and the involvement that those guys could have, away from the pitch. And, it might sound that it's, not a big deal, but I can promise you, whenever the kind of leader of the group is showing that type of, forward thinking, that kind of transmits throughout the rest of the group and kind of gels the group together. So he's kind of done that for Munster and Ireland for, as long as I can remember. And he is, he's just someone that you just love you love to be in those wars with. That, I think back to some big games for Ireland, some big games for Munster, particularly against Glasgow and, the big French teams. Remember, he played a game against Exeter where, he probably shouldn't have played a rugby match for 6 weeks with the rib injury he had the previous week against Gloucester. And Johan had unfortunately mentioned in the media that it was a rib injury that Peter had, and the first whack or the first ruck he was in against Exeter the following week, I think two of their big forwards got stuck into his ribs, and he went on to play 80 minutes and put in a physical performance. And I think that's those special kind of performances, you only get them from special players.
Yeah, because obviously Munster had hummed and hawed over his contract this year, and that got a bit messy. My sense, reading between the lines, was this was a guy who was patching himself up for games and doing it brilliantly. But I suspect on a Sunday through to a Friday, there was a lot of hard recovery going on.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. And I think to Rory's point, you look at the 80 minutes, and if you take that in isolation, I do understand, you're producing a huge performance in a crucial Six Nations match. But, Peter obviously has come to this decision over the last number of weeks or months or whatever it is. He for sure would have understood that was his last time playing in the Millennium Stadium the week just gone. And you get a huge boost from, when something's coming to an end, that there's an extra energy that you're able to tap into. There's an extra there's a few more percent there that you don't get if that decision hasn't been come to. And, I think that's why it's a great decision. He's going out on his terms, and he's still producing the goods when it matters.
Ruud, what would you say of him then and his contribution and the player he was?
His contribution speaks for itself in so many ways. Like, every team he was in were better for him being in it, and he wasn't necessarily the star of the teams that he was in, but he made other players. I think he would have, a lot of the stuff that he did made other players look good, and that's not to say he wasn't capable of big moments. I mean, you think of the time Ireland brought England's record-breaking winning run to a juddering halt in the Aviva Stadium and Eddie Jones in 2017, I think it was. Like, he destroyed England's lineup that day. I remember the day Ireland won the Six Nations in Murrayfield in 2015. He hit a level that year, I think, that I'm not sure he ever recaptured in terms of individual moments, but in Murrayfield that day, he did everything. I remember catching a high ball above a fullback or one of the backs, and then some of his offloading, his passing that day. He was a phenomenal rugby player. Right through to the World Cup that year. Like, he was unbelievable against France that day in Cardiff before his cruciate went. He was at the top of his game, and he had to come back from that injury. It took him. I remember talking to him in 16 or 17 whenever he came back, and it took him a while. Like, they left him behind for Chicago, himself and John O'Brien. Joe Schmidt didn't pick them for that game because they weren't ready. He took him a while to get back, but he worked his way back. And the testimony, every player you talk to loves Peter O'Mahony. Everyone who played with him, like, lads who played against him hate him, but like the guys who play with him, they valued him as a teammate. And Andy Farrell, the way he's kept him around, even there have been times I think in the last year where it has caught up on him a little bit, and against some of the more dynamic teams, when the pace has got really frantic, like Twickenham last year, where you wondered, is he still able to do it? But Farrell just kept him around because he described him as a glue player. he valued him so much for what he brought off the pitch. He made him captain in the post-Johnny Sexton era to kind of manage that first year, to get Doris ready. Everything's been planned here. Like, everything's been kind of plotted out by Andy Farrell, and I'm sure O'Mahony's played a huge part in that. So he and he's also a fiercely intelligent and impressive person. Like, for the first couple of years, and even now, he growls at us when we ask him questions, but his answers always have substance. He's such an impressive figure, an impressive man, and he's been a joy to cover in some way. Like, he wasn't always the most he never got the impression he liked you very much, but he always treated your question with is that
the royal you, or just Rory O'Connor here?
The whole lot of us, but I'm not. Yeah, I wouldn't say he's my biggest fan, but that's fine. Like that, but he, I always just he was one of these people. He always knew he'd think about what you're asking him, take a pause, and he'd give you a good answer because he had the capacity to do so. And like for so long, he carried the weight of Munster on his shoulders, like from a young age. He was steeped in Con, steeped in Munster. Like, his dad's known as Con John. Like, he's steeped in rugby from such a young age, and to captain Munster and to endure such disappointment with Munster, I think that weighed heavily on him for a long time. He spoke about it today. It'll be in the Sunday papers. But his Ireland career was almost an escape in some ways, and he's gone and achieved so much and gotten everything he can out of his career. He's been he'll retire an Irish legend, and justifiably. So all three of them will, obviously, but
yeah,
he was the great of the game.
Yeah, that's a great last point you're making. We'll finish on O'Mahony on that, Andrew. Is Munster in his DNA, was reared on Munster, was reared on the glory years of 06 and 08 and those legends, and I think would have felt a huge responsibility to carry that on. And obviously it was a very tricky decade, and you were there for a lot of it. And I really suspect that, as Rud said, weighed very heavily on him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Is the honest answer. Never spoke to him in that much depth about that exact topic, but it's pretty safe to presume so. The captain bears a lot of the perceived responsibility, I would say, and as we all know, his family are deeply rooted in Cork rugby, Munster rugby, and it certainly wasn't easy at times for Munster over that decade. But there were some great days in there too. We think we played in 4 European Cup semi-finals, and in a few of those years, we did unbelievably well to get there. And he would have played a massive part in it. So I suppose I look at it from a bit of a different slant. Like, it's not just about the winning and losing. Of course, everyone wants to win. Every team that enters a competition wants to win ultimately, and yeah, their goal is to win. Or 90% of them their goal is to win. But Peter, along with that Munster team in certain years, certainly inspired the province to go toe-to-toe with those heavyweights, beat a lot of those heavyweights, and ultimately came up short in those semi-finals. But that was, I think the team were playing slightly above themselves at the time. And,
fair point.
I don't think there's anything to... No, I certainly don't look back on those years as a failure. It was great memories from them. Would have obviously loved to lift the trophy, but I think it's not as black and white as that for me.
Yeah, no, brilliant point. Last 4 in Europe's no small achievement. Let's talk Conor Murray, also 35 years of age. He's still looks in good nick physically at 35. 124 caps, that puts him 4th on the all-time list behind Cian Healey, obviously, O'Driscoll and O'Gara. 3 times a Lion, 13, 17, 21. He's on 199 Munster appearances, so he'll cross that 200 marker, which feels like a real milestone. It's kind of I'm fascinated to see how you see it, Andrew and Rory. Like, from afar, Conor Murray, the first 3/4 of his career is like Rolls Royce. He's a Lion early on. He's an Irish international early on. He's winning things. He's good looking. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's awful. It makes everyone feel inadequate. And then he has this terrible injury, and it's very difficult for him. And he doesn't seem the same player, and he even looks smaller on one side than the other initially coming back. You get these hints that it's very difficult for him to get back physically to where he wanted to be. But he kept going and kept going and kept going, and got back to a very, very good level, and then had to deal with being second choice for Ireland. And you've been this Rolls Royce player, first choice, now you're second choice professionally. He was without blemish. Attitude never seemed to drop. No sulking. always there, always turning up, always coming off the bench, making an impact. So like in so many ways, Andrew, that's like a phenomenal contribution to have made in different ways at different times.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree with everything he said. I think to start off at the end there, the benefit of having someone like Andy Farrell as the head coach can't be overestimated here. You know, Faz would understand all the intricacies of what you said there in terms of Conor's previous heights that he reached, and you know the struggle that he went through with a couple of different injuries. And Faz's environment is shaped by him being able to manage players through those changes, the bit of a change in the guard in terms of Jamison, and how incredibly well he's come on, and he's been backed by Faz. But you wouldn't, it didn't feel like being around Conor, it didn't feel like he felt any less valuable to the group. Do you know what I mean? And that's, you can put that down to Conor, of course you can, but from being in that environment, Andy Farrell plays a massive role in that, and how he manages the person and how he manages the player. And
what kind of things would he do, Andrew?
What things would he do? It's just the way he treated people. It's pretty straightforward, and that sounds easy, but managing guys like Peter, guys like Conor, and even Cian, they've all had similar career trajectories, really. Making them still feel as valued as they would be if they were still kind of the star players, is a really complex skill set to have as a coach. But Faz just seemed to do it naturally, and whether he does it naturally or it's been worked on and fine tuned over years and years from his rugby league time as a player to his early days coaching, he just seems to understand the right pitch to get the best out of people. He when you're in there, he'll treat people like the people will be treated differently, but if you have any bit of common sense, you understand that he's treating people to get the best out of them for themselves and then for the team. You know what I mean?
It's obviously done quite skillfully, because I'm sure most coaches are cognizant of a player of that status dropping to second tier or on the bench, and would try and placate them in some kind of way. But if it's done in a cack-handed way, you could imagine it almost irritating a player more. Like, here, listen, mate, you're dropping me. Let's not spare me the BS and the armour in the shoulder. So, like, it's extra skillful to, do it with a player who's going to recognise BS if they see it coming at them.
Yeah, 100%. And just to go back to your earlier point, about, what surprised me about Conor over the years was how incredibly professional he actually is. Conor be one of my best pals, and often we'd be chatting on a Sunday or whatever it is, a break between camp, and he's just constantly training or recovering, and doesn't make a big deal about it. He just goes about his business. He'd head into the HBC in Munster on a Sunday if he wanted to do an extra lift or do an off-peak conditioning session. He'd be heading down to the local hotel on the weeknights to make sure his recovery is on point. And
right.
That stuff matters. That stuff really does matter, particularly when you're consistent with it. It compounds over time, and it's not just the physical benefits; it's the mental benefits you get from that. That you're still doing what needs to be done, and there's no surprise the likes of him get to his career, and his career is not over. His Irish career is going to be over in a few weeks, but as he said to Ruaidhri earlier on, he still feels like he's got a lot to add, and he'll now reap the massive benefits of that professionalism that he's been acting with for 15 years already.
Right, okay. Murray Rudd?
Yeah, like, it's Ireland's greatest scrum half, isn't he? Like, I know Colin Patterson, the people who were a little bit older than me would say was a brilliant player for in that position. Unfortunately, never saw him play, but modern times, there's no one comes close to Conor Murray, and maybe in the fullness of time, Gibson Park will be in that conversation, but to do it at the level that he did it for as long as he did it, I mean, I think he's the only player I ever gave 10 out of 10 to in player ratings in Chicago. And Ireland's, breakthrough greatest win, he was Ireland's best player that day. He was absolutely faultless. He was the best scrum half in the world for a period. I think it was himself and Aaron Smith for a long time. Smith dropped off around 2016. And Murray was imperious. His box kicking game was second to none. He was the best defensive scrum half in the world. He also had a sensational past, which was undervalued, I think, in terms of what, when people are doing top trumps about him, they kind of almost forgot about it because there was Joe used his greatest strength, his box kick, an awful lot, but that shouldn't deter from the fact that he had a great pass as well, and his career arc was sensational. There's not many players break through in a World Cup training camp and end up starting the most important games at that World Cup. 2 years later, he fought his way into a Lions team, during the Mike Phillips era against more experienced players. I think there's, by the end of that tour, he was seen as the best scrum half in the squad. He started all 3 tests 4 years later. He has achieved it all, apart from, like every Irish player, he didn't quite get to check that World Cup box off, but he was a sensationally important player in a really important position for an awful long time. And I think a bit like Cian Healey, it's probably more important to focus on, although his last couple of years have been really impressive in the way he's dealt with it. You can't forget how good he was for so long as the main man. Because Cian Healey, his last probably 30, 40 caps have been as a backup. But like, Cian, we'll get onto him, but both of them were probably the best players in their position in Europe for an awful long time, and achieved an incredible. It's almost hard to pack what these 3 players have achieved into a news story or a podcast. It's so, they span the breadth of a great Irish rugby era. They played a huge role in it. Yeah,
it's a bloody nuisance they've all gone on the same day, because they all deserve shows in their own in many ways. Before we get on to Healy, what's the highest mark you ever gave Andrew Conway out of 10?
Oh, I'm sure he remembers. Ought to be a few 8s or 9s.
Did you scrape a 7 one day? What?
Definitely a 9, Rory. Surely to God.
Surely a 9 in there somewhere. Too long.
Cian Healey, 37 years of age, most capped Irish player in history, 136 caps, playing since 2009 Australia. Rod, that's a great point you make, and it applies particularly to Healy. People, and it's madness really, people have almost become irked at his role in the last 2-3 years, and almost you see it online, his cap is not worth an O'Driscoll cap, actually almost a turning against a guy who keeps turning up and contributing, and that is admirable in and of itself. But actually peak Cian Healey is really worth remembering for a moment, what we had in our hands here for a few years.
Yeah, the one thing I always, if I picture Cian Healey, it's when he ran over Man Nonu in the 2013 Ireland-New Zealand game that ultimately they lost in the last seconds, but he was a game changer. He came along at a time when, no disrespect to Marcus Horan, but like, he replaced Marcus Horan in the Irish team, and he was a completely different animal. He just was able to do things that no Irish loosehead prop had been able to do before. He was an all-court player. He's an incredible athlete. He's an intelligent rugby player. Great scrummager. It took him a while. There was a couple of, like every prop we saw with Clarkson last weekend, you have to earn your right to kind of get to that level, but he got there incredibly quickly. He was capped young. His kind of name rang out from the school scene. He was kind of known before he was known, a little like Andrew, and he Czech fast tracked him. He became a stalwart for Leinster early. He's been part of all of the European Cup wins, and he should have been a test line in a winning series in Australia in 13. It's a crying shame that he got injured on that tour. Corbisiero ended up being the hero. He was called out as Healy's replacement. He was at his peak at that time, but he kept going. I remember meeting someone who was close to him in 2015. It was like, I don't think he's going to make it back. He had a serious neck injury and a hand as well. I think there was a hand issue that almost threatened his career as well. And Jack McGrath came along, and Jack McGrath carried the team for a couple of years in that position. And McGrath's retired 2 or 3 years, and Cian Healy's still going. So his longevity is impressive, but his ability and his performances when he was at his peak, when Leinster were at their height, his contribution to their Heineken Cup wins, his contribution to Ireland's success. He came along just after the 2009 Grand Slam. I think he was in the squad with Sexton and Dev Toner, but he didn't get any action. But he's been around for so long. Like, his career spans. The Leinster debut was against the Border Reavers, which just speaks to how long he's been around.
Yeah, they all have 5 Six Nations titles, including 2 Grand Slams. So they have medals to back it up. Healy did interviews, Andrew, around the time he passed O'Driscoll's record, and it was like shockingly humble. He was like, I'm not a great player. I shouldn't be in this. Like, I'm just getting caps. He was like playing down so much of his career to a fault and incredibly likable. And I could see why you got a glimpse of why he's maybe so popular behind the scenes, because we don't see much of him publicly. He doesn't put himself out there all that often. So tell us about Healy, the person, and then your sense of the player.
Yeah, like I suppose the person is not too dissimilar to Pete. He was just like he's part of the furniture in like Irish rugby for so long, and he's very authentic. And he's a few different mad hobbies that he goes through phases with, but he's very true to himself. And he I suppose the biggest compliment I could pay to Cian is he talks and treats everyone the exact same way, regardless of if you're Brian O'Driscoll, Johnny Sexton, Andy Farrell, or a fella who's coming in the door for the first time. He sits down. You never get even the slightest change from Cian in terms of how he treats people, and that's a serious measure of the man. And then I agree with Rory. I think back to pre that career-threatening injury and his destruction of teams both sides of the ball, like very Sean O'Brien-esque with how he played the game. And he's obviously I'm no expert in scrums, but I think he was pretty good at scrummaging too. And that was a very, very, very serious injury. And Rory, I think you're right about the hand. The hand was linked to the neck, and that was due to an issue with the power he was able to generate down one side of his body. And to come back, and I'd love to know how many caps he's got since when he first came back. Was it 2016 or 2017? I can't remember how long he was out for. We're probably talking 50, 60 caps here, or at least 40 anyway. And like he earned those caps the hard way. And it's been a time where he's had to do the same thing as the other boys in the number one jersey wasn't his anymore, and Porter took it and owned it and brought it forward. But Cian is, you talk to the likes of Andrew Porter, you talk to other loose heads or any front rows, and they'll tell you how much Cian Healey has added to their careers, both in terms of sitting down and, talking through footage, but also out in the training pitch, and, just being really collaborative with his teammates and not seeing his teammates as competition, but seeing them as full teammates, and whatever's best for the team is the role he was always willing to play. And again, it's from my end, it's as high a compliment as I can play an ex-teammate.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, look, we're not going to see their likes again, really. These are really exceptional careers, and 370 plus caps are going to walk out the door after Italy, hopefully with another medal in their pocket. Their careers would very much deserve it and warrant it. Andrew, really good with your time. Just before you go, Felix Jones is out of hibernation. He clearly has decided a third World Cup sounds good after winning in 19 and 23 as part of South Africa's backroom team. He obviously left to become defence coach with Steve Borthwick's England. That did not go well, and he was working out notice until December, and clearly Razzie has picked up the phone, so he'll go back in alongside the likes of Tony Brown and Jerry Flannery. You obviously would have worked under him and obviously played with, am I right in saying both? Yeah, so why is this guy so highly rated? I hear about the work rate all the time.
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the foundation of everything. Felix probably was the most impactful person on my career. Actually, probably isn't needed in that sentence. I came down from Leinster to Munster, and it was so green. I had so much to learn, and Felix had gone down that same path, a few years previously. And I just remember over the first year really getting the grasp of how respected Felix was amongst the playing group and the coaching staff. And, one of the things that was a big shift for me in my career was I wanted to try and emulate that level of respect based on, the work that I put in to my craft. And I don't think I could have ever have reached that same, level of output, that level of obsession that Felix brought. But it was a good direction to go down. And I remember very clearly Felix getting that neck injury, being over in Dave Kilcoyne's house after the match, where a few of us just went for, I can't remember what we were up to, but probably nothing too hectic. And Felix couldn't move at all. But that's not that, that happens sometimes in a match. You get a stinger, you get a bang, and you're pretty stiff. And then I was up in Dublin a couple of weeks later, and I got a text from being like, "Oh, are you in Dublin?" And I said, "Yeah." So come on, let's meet for a coffee. And that's not very Felix. Felix will, if Felix is calling over to your house to get something off, he wouldn't even have enough time for a cup of tea because he's that busybody type of character. So met him in a spot in Donnybrook, and he told me that the consultant had said, "Listen, it's too reckless for you to continue on." And I shed a tear. I was so gutted that someone who was a great friend of mine now after a few years, but someone who I looked up to so much, wasn't going to be in the dressing room anymore as a player. And then, it was a huge blow for Munster, but within a few months, he was back in the building, helping out in an informal way. And again, can't remember exact timelines, but, within 12 months, certainly he was part of the coaching staff. Rassie had come in. Poor Axel had passed away, which shifted the dynamics of the coaching staff greatly, because obviously that was completely unexpected. And Felix took on a whole lot more responsibility, and he's built different, Felix. He's a different type of mentality than anyone I've ever met, and probably anyone I ever will meet. And you hear that. That's not me bigging him up. That's pretty much consistent across everyone's opinion of him. And he didn't get what he deserved out of his playing career. But I remember speaking to him, and I just had this strange sense that, and I didn't have a clue what path he was going to go down, where he was going to go, what the journey was going to be like. But I remember just thinking that, you didn't get what you deserved out of your playing career, but I think you'll get what you deserve out of your next phase in life. And obviously that's come to pass with 2 World Cups for a young man who's probably 36, 37. Felix is very clever. Felix is very, very clever. He's tactical. He was blessed, obviously, that he was, at the timings were such that Rassie was, came to Munster in the first place. That's been a huge part of Felix's career. And he's him and Jerry Flannery are thick as thieves, and I'm sure it was too good an opportunity to turn down to go back. And it's often, when you're in an environment, it's really good, but you don't quite realize how incredible it is until you leave it. I'm sure there was a bit of that when Felix left South Africa, and obviously he's decided to go back and chase a 3rd World Cup title in 3 years, which I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, it's all fascinating. When you say he has a different mentality to anyone else I've been around, you've been around people with some fairly impressive mentalities, So can you unpack what you mean by that? Because the guy's kind of taken on a mythical status. Works harder than anyone, different mentality. So how would you characterize his mentality specifically?
I would say, and there's it's at all costs. That was how he played the game. It was he did not think about his body. He did and of course, most professional athletes who get to an international level or, really good provincial players, most of us have, that in us, but we're not 100% that, that's different. And the way he, that kind of speaks to how he goes about everything in his life. He's 100 miles an hour constantly. Right. Oftentimes I'd speak to him in the evenings back in the day, and we'd be trying to meet up. I'd try to get him to, come down. We used to go to Castroy Park for a recovery session, and it'd be, 9 o'clock. We'd go down, late when, it was nice and quiet, and he wouldn't have eaten dinner because he'd be so busy knocking around and doing jobs. He'd just, I'm sorry, I forgot to eat, so I got to go and eat. That's kind of what he's like.
What jobs, is he out building a shed? What's he doing?
Oh, he'd be pals with all these local characters around Limerick and Clare. He'd be
that sounds a bit nefarious. I mean, what are you saying?
No, I swear his best pal is a guy called Morris from Limerick, and they're thick as thieves. But that's just who he was, and even I was helping him out a bit with some of those World Rugby changes that have come in with the high ball. And so that was going back a few months, and he kind of coaxes me into come over to the house for a pizza, and we'll spend about 30-40 minutes on it. I just want to get your opinion on things. One, as I was on the way over, he said, "You got to pick up pizza yourself. I don't have any pizzas here. I haven't had time to get them." So I said, "Grand." And then 2, you end up there for 3 or 4 hours, and he is incessantly going through clips, okay. And he's got this array of detail that I just didn't even know that level of preparation existed. and he's meeting anyone he can to get a different angle, a different perspective on, the really intricate bits around the laws and how they're interpreted, and how he could, help out World Rugby to make the game a bit more pleasing on the eyes, I suppose, was the goal of the shifts around the law. That's just, that's just who he is. He's just wired differently.
Amazing. Man of mystery as well. Just going around Limerick doing jobs. I'm doing jobs. I'm not telling you there.
If he ever grants you an interview, ask him what those jobs are.
I will.
Chance to be a fine thing.
Yeah. Jeez, non-stop interviews.
Yeah.
We'll let you go because I've kept you longer than I said we would. Life is good. You're busy. You've set up a new business, which is a very brave thing to do. You're a founder of 5X Flow. Is that how I'm calling it? 5X Flow. Yeah. So give us the sales pitch there.
No sales pitch really. It's just, something that I'm really, I suppose, journey I went on as a player, moving to Munster and the shifts that I had to make to change the arc of my career and the direction it was going, set me down a path of respecting how the mind works, probably more so than is usual in professional sports, and kind of went on a deep dive into, what was going on in my internal narrative, how I was, how I was dealing with setbacks, what were my abilities to, reframe things and put them in a way that is going to give me more fuel to move forward and not hamper me and keep me stagnant. And, I kind of was always interested in the kind of that high performance space, but, I suppose the little added extra bit that I experienced was that human experience side of things, and the ability to take control of your mind and harness it and use it in a way that, it's great to get professional performance results, but it's also was really enjoyable for me to go on a bit of a journey of upgrading that kind of mindset. And a quote that I love, and I've got it on my website, is the quality of your life is the quality of your mind. And I just believe that, to be true so much. And, I've started a professional doctorate in UL, which is all part-time, thank God. And just going on a journey of, what do I like talking about? If I meet someone in the street, what would I be happy talking to them for 2 or 3 hours about, and see if I can make a business around it,
Okay, very good. Well, listen, best of luck with it. Thank you so much for the time. I'm sure a fitting tribute for the three lads as well. So Andrew Conway, thanks a mil. We'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.
Thanks, lads.
Andrew Conway there. Sorry, Rory, I was slightly ignoring you there because I knew he was tight on time. Geez, Felix Jones.
There you go. I did think this was probably the most likely of his moves. He really loved being part of that South African coaching ticket. I think it's one of the most stimulating coaching tickets you can be part of. Rassie Erasmus, we know he thinks outside the box. I know Nienaber's moved on, but there's great coaches in there. And one of the things you heard about his departure from England was that he just wasn't enjoying it as much, that he didn't feel like he was being challenged in the same way as part of the Sportswick coaching ticket. And he showed that kind of a bit of selfishness, or maybe selfishness is the wrong word, but an independent streak or a determination to be somewhere where he felt like he was being challenged, and he walked.
Yeah.
And it can't have been an easy decision, but I'd say going back has been an easy decision. I know David Humphreys has met him a number of times to see how he might fit into the Irish setup, and they're obviously, it's not for now, but if he ever does come back and he come work within Irish rugby, he's been kind of part of this hothouse of rugby ideas, some of which are completely out there. But we saw France go 7-1 last week, so it's not like a lot of what Rassie Erasmus and this coaching ticket have come up with is now kind of commonplace around the game. And it's a fascinating appointment. They look like they have a full coaching ticket already, but they see enough value in Felix to bring him in. We don't know what exact role he'll be doing, but I'd say his importance will have grown from World Cup cycle to World Cup cycle. And when you hear Andrew talk about him, someone who knows him really well, you can understand why he's so highly valued. And a lot of people you speak to kind of just think so highly of him. They thought highly of him as a player, as a person, and as a coach. And he's but you're right, there's an enigmatic quality to him as well. And the fact that going and doing this kind of just adds to that.
Yeah. So look, on any other day, we would be leading with the news that Munster have a new head coach.
That's old news, Joe. That's yesterday's news.
Yeah. Business done pretty quietly here. There were the Stuart Lancaster links, obviously, but this has not been a Mark Canham FAI production. It's been pretty low key, and now they seem, reading about Clayton McMillan, they seem to have landed a coup here.
Yeah, really good appointment. It's been a long process, and obviously, I don't think there was no real. The Graham Rowntree departure was very sudden, and it's not like they had something lined up. So they were, once that kind of negotiations had gone on, and Graham Roundtree's departure was announced, they were, I think the CEO Ian Flanagan had said they planned to keep this coaching ticket in place for a couple of years. So they were at ground zero, and they had to work their way out of it, and they've taken their time. And at times it's felt a bit strange that they've kind of dragged it out for this long. And I guess there is a bit of echoes of the FAI, and there's been a bit of a communication, a gap in communication as well, because they weren't able to talk about Rowntree's departure, and they have been kind of, Ian Costello's been up several times, Prendergast has thrown his hat in the ring, and I think internally there was a desire to go forward with the current coaching ticket and promote Mike Prendergast, but I think the IRFU were quite keen to get an experienced kind of senior coach who's been around the block a bit in on top of what they've got, because they rate what they've got, but there's not a lot of head coaching experience there.
Okay.
And McMillan really ticks a lot of boxes. He's a hard-nosed former policeman, actions over words kind of character. I think he's well able to talk. There's a very good hour-long podcast recently done with him about kind of what he stands for and what the Chiefs stand for underneath them. He's very highly regarded within the New Zealand rugby system. He's coached the Maori. He's coached the New Zealand second team against Munster in the last year. The Chiefs are one of the best teams in Super Rugby right now, play a really good brand. Alex Nankerville and John Ryan have both played for him. So there's an existing link to the squad. So there's a bit, at least there'll be a few people in there who'll know what's coming when he comes in. And he's very highly respected. It's a really smart hire. I think he's a good fit for Munster. I think he's kind of what they need. And he'll walk in the door and inherit a coaching staff. So he's not bringing with a lot of Kiwis with him. So there's still a very local feel, and a very, Prendergast and Leamy are two really highly regarded homegrown coaches who've experienced things elsewhere. But I do think he's a lovely fit in what's going to be like the post-Peter O'Mahony era is a bit of and Conor Murray era is a big change for Munster, and they're losing two senior figures there, so it's going to be a tricky period, and you wonder what he's got in terms of squad. But I think he's the kind of character who will build something there.
Gregor Paul, the New Zealand journalist, colleague of ours, you know him from games down the years, wrote that he's the hottest emerging coach in the country. He has been coaching for the guts of 20 years, as you said, policeman, and played for Bay of Plenty as well, and then went full-time into rugby. And I guess what's really instructive, he had time in the Mitra 10 Cup with Bay of Plenty, but Warren Gatland, as we know, went down to coach the Chiefs, and he went in as Gatland's assistant coach in 2020. But then Gatland had to go on the Lions tour of 21, and things hadn't gone well under Gatland. They had lost 8 from 8 in that season's Super Rugby season. And then McMillan takes over and gets them to a Super Rugby final. And he's got them to 3 Super Rugby finals in 4 years. And Gatland obviously returns, and there seems to be like a kind of awkwardness that we've realised this guy's the guy, you're not the guy. And they kind of did well, you be director of rugby, Warren, and you be head coach and work together. And in the end, the call from Wales was almost a blessing, because they feel, McMillan was so clearly the coach, and you mentioned head coach of the Maori All Blacks on the side. So his record with the Chiefs, building something that's a little bit in the doldrums up in a relatively quick space of time, that's kind of music to Munster fans' ears.
Yeah, and there'd be two organisations there would be similarities there. The Chiefs are kind of they're a rural from the Waikato. They're probably seen as the Auckland and the Crusaders. Maybe Munster would see themselves more as the Crusaders, and fair enough, because they've got more heritage in that way, because the Chiefs are more, I know Pat Lam built Connacht based on the Chiefs. It was one of the reasons he went and got Bundy Aki, because the Chiefs had come from kind of being the fourth province to go and win Super Rugby. But there is, I think what he's done with the Chiefs, what Munster fans will really like, is that he's leaned into that identity that they have. He's built a team based on that identity. He's asked the players and the coaches and the administrators and everyone to kind of say, what do we stand for? And he's built a team around what they stand for. And not only that, he's also built a team that can play a great brand of rugby. He's well connected in New Zealand. So from a recruitment point of view, you'd imagine there's going to be a couple of smart signings coming through in the next year or two from maybe that second tier of New Zealand. Like Nankivell's been a great addition. His pedigree is excellent. It's their best coaching appointment in terms of pedigree since Radzi Erasmus.
Okay.
Like Roundtree, they kind of almost reversed back into that because they interviewed all round for that, and he was in the building. Johan van Gran was very inexperienced when they got him. This guy has really good credentials, really good pedigree, a really good reputation. So I think Munster fans are right to be excited, and Munster are willing to wait for him, which is a sign that they obviously believe in this guy, but they also think what they've got is pretty strong as well.
Yeah, really exciting for Munster. And an interesting life story as well. I'm sure when he's over here, he'll sit down and do an interview, but born in Perth in Australia, and it's dreadful, really. His Australian mother died from cancer when he was just 6 months old. And so he returned to the ancestral home of his Maori father, Ruaidhri, where he was brought up by his aunt. And that's how he made his way in life. If you're wondering about Mike Prendergast as well, who obviously had kind of, he was interested for sure. He is moving officially from attack coach to senior coach, is what the statement says. So there's a degree of elevation to his status. And Ian Costello is moving from head of rugby operations into a newly created role, general manager of Munster Rugby, which is to oversee high performance and strategy all the way through. So that's the word from Munster. We should just mention before we go, and I know you do have to run, Connacht are bringing Rob Sabe, Australian A head coach, Brumby's assistant, into their coaching ticket next season, according to the Australian website, The Roar. Scott Fardy, it seems, is going in the opposite direction to the Brumbies, so he's kind of attack specialist.
Yeah, which we're kind of working out where he fits and what happens to Pete Wilkins now, because Pete Wilkins was promoted from senior coach to director of rugby 2 seasons ago, and Scott Fardy came in as part of that, and like it's been fairly middling from Connacht the last 2 years. Wilkins, I understand, will be part of the setup next year, but I'm not sure exactly how this is going to shake up in the end, where Sieb will come in, whether it's above or alongside Wilkins. There's a few different things to come, but he does seem to be very highly regarded in Australia. He works under Larkham at the Brumbies.
They seem to have had a kind of a falling out. Larkham and him.
So according to Christy Doran in The Roar, I don't have the information to back that up myself, but Christy be very, very well sourced journalist in Australia. And I guess what the RFU are doing here is they've gone and recruited the Australia A coach to coach Connacht and the New Zealand A coach to coach Munster. So you're getting, like, David Humphreys has spoken on the record this year about his big priority is to get the other 3 provinces to be far more competitive with Leinster and produce more players. And it looks like they're putting a fair bit of budget in behind that in terms of going and getting really experienced, good coaches. Sieb is not a big name. I don't know how to pronounce it either. I'm sure we'll learn once he gets here. It's not been confirmed by Connacht just yet, and that's why there's a bit of uncertainty about how it's all going to shake up. But yeah, expecting Fardy to leave. Mark Sexton's already left to go to, he will leave at the end of the season to go to Ulster. That's been announced. Don't think that's gone down particularly well within Connacht, and John Muldoon will stay on. So we've a bit of work to do to find out exactly what's going on in the Connacht coaching ticket. But seems like a good, pretty exciting hire at the same time. Someone, again, with a lot of experience and a bit of good pedigree as well.
Interesting times. That's enough news for one day, I think. And then I guess it's we spin into next week, and it's all eyes on France, which is just, it's like a Six Nations final. Amazing.
Yeah, that's it. Like it's almost, even Paul O'Connell was up today, and it was almost secondary today, the fact that they're playing France. And maybe that's part of the RFU strategy with releasing it all today. It keeps it on the down low. Tickets are all sold out, but like we've plenty of time to build up to that one. It's going to be great.
We do. Listen, thank you so much. I know it's a really busy day for you, Rory O'Connor. You can read Rudd's thoughts and all this in the paper. Thanks, Emil. Cheers, man. That is our rugby for today. thanks again to Andrew Conway, and our rugby coverage in Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels at grassroots with the AIL. They are official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams, and their Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcome everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, then you can visit energia.ie/rugby. We'll catch you tomorrow.